Welcome to Philosophy from the Frontline. This podcast explores the intersection of philosophy, entrepreneurship, and veteran transition. Join us as we delve into the minds of successful entrepreneurs who have made the journey from military service into small business ownership. Our guests will share their insights, experience, and unique perspectives on life, business, and the world around us. Through deep conversations and thought-provoking discussions, we hope to inspire and empower our listeners to tackle their own challenges and achieve their dreams. So sit back, relax, and get ready to explore the world of entrepreneurship from a veteran's point of view. This is Philosophy from the Frontline, and we'll see you on the high ground.
It's Rob Robinson. I've got Tom Coyle on the line, and we are doing Philosophy from the Frontline. So to get right into it, just a quick introduction about yourself, Tom, if you don't mind.
Oh, absolutely, Rob. Thanks for having me on. So, we were in the same company at West Point, graduated in 1997, spent some time in field artillery, went to Fort Campbell, then finished out at 3rd ID, did some cool stuff along the way doing that time. I was the guy who always just missed or the deployment or just after deployment type of thing. Actually, I was made battery XO, and so the battery went to a new battery, and then the battery I left went to Kosovo. I gave up command of 2 FAD in 2001, and then the unit went to Afghanistan. She left in 9/11 around November, December. So it's like, I'm the guy, and then I show up at 3rd ID, and I get assigned Rear Detachment Command because I want to keep everybody else frozen in place. So I was the guy who never went anywhere in the Army. But I left in the Army in 2004, went to join the State Department Foreign Service, did that for a bit. And now I got my own company, Adventures in Leadership.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so moving into question 2, which is, when did you transition out of the military and why?
It was 2004, and I was kind of going back and forth, and so then I had this idea of going to Special Forces. I made it through Special Forces Assessment and Selection course, and then but I did not make it to the Q course. So after the Q course, I kind of did this, what's next? What do I really want to do? And I enjoyed the Army, but, there were some things that just drove me a little nuts about it, and that's any organization, frankly. And I talked to a guy who actually was at the State Department. I'm like, hey, that's actually kind of cool. And maybe and I loved foreign affairs and international relations, that type of thing. So I thought, maybe this is a better skill set for me. Because the thing is, the Army was, it didn't look like I'd be able to do a FAO track, because with artillery, they're not letting the officers go over to that FAO track just because of the state of the branch at that point. And then it's like, well, I could wait and maybe do something, and a few years later eventually get to that spot, or I can kind of do what I want to do right now. And that's what sort of I made my jump there to leave and do that. And no, that was a good challenge, but like anything else, and it was nice. I actually went to Afghanistan as a diplomat, which was an interesting perspective. And it was cool, and I really had value added. I was performing a lot of responsibilities above my pay grade, so to speak, because I really understood both worlds. I came from the military, and I, of course, then being in the State Department, so spent a lot of time with provincial reconstruction team sites and doing those types of things, and being able to really speak the language of the two bureaucracies. And that's really tapped me for a lot of things, just because I could fill a role, and everyone not understanding each other's role. Sometimes you get that with all these different organizations on the ground, and I really enjoyed that for a time. And so,
no, that's good. And I know that, I've had some experience with State Department. One of my last deployments when I was in Iraq, I ended up having to go to the embassy daily for just an operational update brief, and being able to have that cross-cultural discussion is very, very important. And it's interesting. That's part of the reason why I'm doing this podcast, is to make people realize that, you can read all these articles that'll tell you, hey, you're not ready to translate on the outside, or there's something not for you in the civilian sector. And it's kind of really going back to hunting those opportunities that kind of fit your personality. And the biggest takeaway that I've learned so far in the 5 discussions that I've had with people that have come on is just understanding that, your transition is super, super personal. And what you end up doing is super, super personal, because you have to have the right fit. And one of the things that we talked about with quite a few folks is just the interview process. You're actually giving that company the opportunity to get to know you, but you're also trying to get to know them and see where you fit. And it's just interesting, hearing that you transitioned from the military, went to Department of State, and now you're doing your own thing, which is huge. And being your own boss has some advantages, and there's some disadvantages as well, but at the end of the day, it's something that you chose to do. And I want to highlight, the transition points are important, but it's what you do after that, and kind of acknowledging your efforts both in and outside of the military. So that rolls right into question 3, and that is, what are you doing now?
So, and sort of follow up with just say then, and I'll get to that question, but sort of follow up with the comments you just made here. Every single transition, I didn't rush it. The thing is, I see people, if I was in the Army, they would leave. What's your plan? Well, I don't know. I'm just leaving the Army. So, I mean, take the time. And I did this even, like when I started Adventures in Leadership, this was kind of like something I was doing on the side to basically figure out, could I validate the business plan, do it outside, take leave here and there and do some of these, leadership things and thinking, yeah, not only do I like it, this is viable, this is a business, that type of thing. And so when you're looking at what you want to do, whether it's working for a company, organization, take the time to do the homework and plan early. That's the thing. And so, yeah, right now I am doing my own business. And even then I've transitioned this. So the core business, Adventures in Leadership, was experiential learning. I started off targeting high school students. And this would start off as a give back thing while working at state, right? Take 2 weeks off in the summer and run 2 1-week camps for kids. And we do basically Camp Buckner type stuff. I mean, we toned down the military aspect of it, but the thing like leaders reaction course type things, orienteering, land nav, they navigate to a point, to get to a point, here's your problem you have to solve on to the next point, and really get them solving the problems themselves. And then I started getting corporate gigs. So, hey, this is kind of cool. Can you come to my company and do this type of thing? And so it's all experiential learning. And one of the things at the end of the week, I'd take people to Gettysburg and do this whole like a staff ride. I later wrote a book, Leadership Lessons from the Battle of Gettysburg, and that's led to me doing more of these staff ride things. Right now, in today's COVID environment, I'm losing that business. And so I've had to adapt yet again, like a lot of businesses have, doing more online stuff. And something I kind of got into, I've always been really comfortable interacting with tech people. And, I did a little bit to the state where I was helping them. Like, I kind of was like, hey, how come we don't have this? And I kept complaining about things I don't have that I do have on the outside. And they said, hey, you look like you understand this AI stuff. Maybe you could help us implement some systems. Now I've applied that to Adventures in Leadership, where I've been helping decision makers implement AI. A lot of people right now are going, hey, I know I need autonomous systems, but I don't even know where to start. And so I've been kind of working with companies doing that. Working with another West Point grad. I have a non-disclosure, so I can't talk about this, but we're helping up a company doing some AI processes with them that the CEO is like, look, I need some challenges here from understanding my customers to everything else like this. And we're just way behind. Yet we have the resources to do this.
Yeah, well, that sounds good. Discussion for another time, because that's basically what I'm doing down here at ETI, is trying to integrate technology that's emerging into into the military, DoD apparatus, law enforcement locally, and then focusing in on STEM education and academic partnerships. So that's right.
We'll definitely have to have another conversation on that.
Yeah, there's definitely something in the wheelhouse about that. But again, it's one of those things that, like, most people realize that it's out there, but they don't know how to capitalize on it. And that's one of the things that we're very fortunate enough, particularly in where we are today, is it's hard to say this and because of the tragedy that's been associated with COVID, but business has been good for us as far as outreach and relationship building. Yep. It's unfortunate that, it took this situation to get to that, but a lot of the things that I've been able to do, particularly just getting the podcast rolling, has been because people are isolated and we can't go anywhere. So it's now time to have those conversations with folks that are interested in some of the things that we're doing, but also provides some feedback to the community. So, once the doors are open and everybody starts rolling back into work, I think there's going to be a lot of positive momentum for a lot of businesses as a result of the relationships that have built since we've all been on lockdown.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think this is, look, so you're going to have something that hits you like a left hook out of nowhere and you can't do anything about it. And you can sit and feel sorry for yourself or, take some action on this thing. And, for me, taking companies, typically this is the season where one company per week, I'm taking them to Gettysburg, and that's a nice little chunk of income that I'm just not getting right now. And I can feel sorry for myself or do something different. And what's interesting right now, you mentioned when people are looking for things to do, you don't know what you want to do yet. I mean, like 365 Data Science was offering free data science courses to people for this pandemic thing. So learning some Python, learning some, deep learning, all those types of things. Think of anything you want to do. I have a friend of mine writing a screenplay right now. I always wanted to do one, just finish it up there. And I was going to try and shop it around. If he gets nowhere, he finally wrote the screenplay he wanted to write. Another friend of mine, he's a non-West Pointer, but a military veteran. He wrote his novel, got it all complete. I always wanted to write a novel, so he used his time to do that. Well, I'm not working. I also do the thing I've never had time to do.
Yeah, very true. And I enjoy it. Like I said, I've been incredibly blessed to be able to work and then still be able to do outreach. And part of the outreach is, the podcast as well.
Absolutely.
Getting veterans to have those conversations, and it's incredible. And one of the things that I'll highlight as well, and before we get into the fourth question, is your network, right? And I talked about the utilization of social media and LinkedIn and all those other things to kind of leverage those tools to create opportunities for yourself. And I can tell you that, in a given week, I connect with 5 to 10 people that are relationships or second or third order folks on LinkedIn, but they always have something valuable. So your network is important. And the other piece of it is you kind of get to see what people are doing if they're active on the business side on LinkedIn. Social media is what it is. We see the best of people in those, but from a business perspective, being able to highlight what you're doing, and it may garner interest, like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. Let me reach out to that person, or do I know somebody that's in that person's network that can kind of help me build a relationship with them? And it's huge.
Absolutely. And for the chime in on that point there, I mean, one of the things I thought was very valuable to me. So I actually got one of my big executive coaching contracts, a Fortune 500 firm, came about because I posted a video on LinkedIn about why your training program sucks. And someone in the company saw that video and said, holy crap, this is exactly what we need. And the whole premise behind it is training in most employees' minds, and certainly in the military, is somebody screwed up, therefore we're having training. Someone touched somebody inappropriately, so we're going to have training now. Oh, we're having leadership training. Who created the hostile work environment that I'm now going to have training on? So it's the mass punishment thing. So even with something good, it doesn't resonate. So we went this whole thing, and so we set that program, got rave reviews, but it was just putting stuff out there. And I write on Medium. In fact, the gig I got right now with this AI thing was because of my latest article on Medium. And someone goes, hey, wow, yeah, I need someone like you. And I just connected with the person on LinkedIn and said, I need someone like you who understands this stuff to help us with this thing.
Yeah. And I can tell you that the AI problem set is huge, and then everybody is doing it. It's just a matter of perfecting that technology to make it useful to the average person. It's kind of like a cell phone.
Right.
20 years ago, we had the big bag phones and nobody knew how to use them. And now everybody has a Library of Congress in their pocket. Now, whether they choose to use it is a different story, but it's available.
Well, and the other thing about that is one of the things I've been looking at is in taking my cross-culture communication stuff and all the things that came from the State Department as well as saying that, and combining the military, is how do you filter through those? You're going to get all this stuff, and a lot of people I see on the comments on social media, I don't even know if something's true. Like, how do I even evaluate that? And you have all this information, but it's like how to filter it out. And it's a challenge. Certainly in the battlefield, that's something veterans can really help with, because that's our daily life. You get all this information feed coming in, you've got to process more information that you can actually humanly process and make decisions on this. And I think really tying it back, one thing I wanted to bring up there is veterans. A lot of times they look at it. They try to do too much of a linear relationship between what their job set is and what I'm able to do. Well, I'm just infantry, therefore I can only do these things, or I was this, or I did this. I helped a guy get a job at Honest Tea. They were acquired by Coyle a while back, but they maybe people have seen them around their company. But I lent him my book. Hey, love this book. Knew he wanted to do something different, and he read the book that these guys did. It was in comic book form. So basically, their whole business thing, their whole story is in a big graphic novel type of format, and he loved it. Wrote to these guys and said, look, I'm not sure if I have any skills to help your company, but I really believe in your mission, what you're trying to do, and all this kind of thing. And I know I need to be part of this somehow. And he actually got a job there, got a good salary, and been moving up to the company.
Wow, that's amazing. All right, so moving on to question number 4, and this is one that always kind of is not really odd, but it's definitely something that we have to talk about. And this is part of the real meat of the podcast is, what was the hardest part about transitioning out of the military? And you have a unique story because you went from one department to another, but I mean, I'm sure that there was still some learning curve that kind of happened as you were switching over to DOS and then eventually getting to where you are today.
Well, absolutely. So the big learning curve is in the military, for the most part. If I talk to a fellow officer and they said, yeah, I can do this for you, they're going to come through, or they'll be coming up. If something happened, they're going to come up and say, hey, sorry, man, this happened and here's what happened. And the frustration when I first went to DOS was that, you could talk to somebody, yeah, I gotcha. But they really had no intention of ever doing it. But they say all the right things just to make you feel good in the conversation, and they don't do it. There's also the thing of we're not calling, we weren't ranking our collars. There is no sir and that type of thing. I mean, obviously the ambassador or it was either sir or ma'am, but it's a very informalized network in a lot of ways. And it just kind of gets the idea where like, the boss says, here's what I want. So I'm not doing that. What do you mean you're not doing that? We were just meeting. That's what he wants. That's what we're doing. And these conversations, like, we get these meetings in the ambassador, and he's like, I want us to go out there. We need to be linked up with the military at these reconstruction sites. Like, I don't want to work with the military. Like, it doesn't matter. That's what the man said.
Yeah.
Agree or disagree, that's what we have got to do. And so that was a hard thing for me to get used to. That I had to do more follow-up with people to make sure that weren't just like telling you what I wanted to hear and then just blowing me off. So that was the biggest thing for me.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things, like one of my first guests that I had on, she is a grad from '07, and again, I'm going to harp on this point until I get another really good one, but she had come up with a pretty creative idea and floated it around her team. And then one of the members of her team took it and presented it to the CEO and didn't even give like any acknowledgement of her efforts on the project, and I think one of the things that we learn in the military, and it's funny that you mentioned an NDA with another company, but one of the things that we learn is like OPSEC is everything. So we only talk about what's important with who needs to know, and it's kind of baked in and inherent in what we do. But, as you're transitioning out, like I've signed more NDAs in this company than, I've signed non-disclosures for the military, because it's like 2 or 3, and that's basically tied to when you upgrade your clearance, right? Mm-hmm. But it's because inherently everything that we do, we have to maintain a level of security on, and it's just a different part of the transition. So it's one of those things that, like, yeah, your intellectual ideas when you're in the Army, who cares if your subordinate takes it and runs with it, as long as it gets in front of the boss and their success. But when there's a dollar sign attached to it or a promotion, then it makes it a little bit more uncomfortable, and you're like, man, like I think I could have done that better. I wish I could have. But definitely one of those things that like I've always taken a note, and like I've found a lot of interesting people that have said, hey, this is kind of how it went down, or something that was kind of crazy that just kind of popped up along the way. And then go ahead.
Yeah, no, and just to clarify, DOS, like most people weren't like this, but there was there's a sizable chunk of the population that was, more so than I would have found in the military. So, I mean, yeah. So I guess kind of make it like I'm not trashing the DOS too much. No, I mean, for the most part, people were the right kind of people, especially in a place like Afghanistan, those type of who volunteer for that type of thing. But you did have that. And there's more of this, and I see it in corporate America too. So in the consulting, the boss says something, it's like, that's not, we'll just blow that off type of thing, or we'll slow roll that. And I've heard people tell me that does exist somewhat in the military to a degree, and yeah, I kind of saw it, but usually it gets solved pretty quickly, because once the old man finds out what's going on, then the problem is solved.
Yeah, so somebody's going to get smacked around, and then there's going to be a result from that. Yeah, and I think that's the most interesting part of the biggest change between military culture and corporate culture is that you can read all the leadership books that you want, and what points out the most interesting piece is people, right? People are the most dynamic aspect of leadership, regardless of how good you are or how poor you are as a leader. Understanding, the leadership overall is really, how do I get people to interact, and knowing those personalities. So kind of like mapping out the peoplescape, or the human terrain, as we would say in the military, is understanding that like Rob's the kind of guy that I got to follow up on, or Tom's the kind of guy that's fire and forget, and I can launch him on a mission and he can accomplish it.
The other thing too is look at is important is when you're getting interviewed, you're also interviewing them. I mean, don't be afraid to like walk away from the interview saying, this is not the right cultural fit. I don't want to be part of this. I'm getting a bad vibe of something here. Those are all fair discussions. Sometimes you're transitioning, you want to get that job, you're trying to get that job, you think, oh my God, this is great. Don't make the square peg fit in the round hole. Make sure you're being honest with yourself. If there's something that's just like, I just don't think I'd be happy here for whatever that is. I don't like the people. And the thing that goes back to the thing that when the point you started touching on is, like in DOS, as I started moving around, one thing I wanted to do is I started to look at the boss. Is this the kind of boss, the person I'm working for, that would have my back? Like, in other words, if they said they gave me something, I did it, and if someone goes, well, I'm going to blow off Tom, like, is he going to have my side if someone's like, well, I don't want to do that? Like, if those things in there, and that was important. Not everybody was like that, but I found the people that were like that, made sure I was working for them, because they're the ones who are going to sit there and say, yes, you will do no, don't do that. Or if I come back and say, look, I've been doing everything I can, especially when I'm doing with a peer who's of the same position, who I can't really, I can't throw UCMJ at him. And it's just like, we're just going back and forth. We have different viewpoints. Like, yep, no problem. I'll take care of that.
Yeah. And that's great part of the discussion too. So after transitioning from DOS, and this kind of goes into question number 5, what was the hardest part of you, like starting your own business and getting into, lessons in leadership?
Well, and the first one we go to anyone starting any kind of business is, am I going to fail or succeed? How is this going to go? Can I keep up the momentum? You get those first clients, and how can I keep this going? That first and foremost was the biggest thing, the fear of failure. And what happens? Like, there is no guaranteed income. I'm not getting there's no guaranteed salary there. What do you do in that case? And so those are those things that kind of keep you up at night. And what kind of got me through that, and this is kind of something I started doing. I read Tim Ferriss' 4-Hour Work Week, and when you talk about your fears, when fears are just in your mind, they can cause you to just shut down or panic or not do that kind of thing. But when you sit there and he's like, okay, let me lay out all the things that could possibly happen. What would happen here? And you write it out. Then you take the paper down one side, a 8x11 sheet of paper. On one half, put the problem. The other half of what would happen. What would I do in that situation? Oh yeah, I have this. Well, hey, you know what? If this happened and I couldn't pay the mortgage, well, hey, I got this much money in my TSP, so I could use that money if I had to. Or I couldn't have this. Here's what I could do about this. If I had to take someone to the hospital, and you start going through that process, then when you're looking at it, you're like, hey, these aren't big at all. I can solve these, or at least I have a plan to solve them if something happens.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that, some of us are fortunate enough, like me, to land the. I won't say it's a dream job, but it's a great job. It's exciting. And I walked out of the military, was able to sign up and do this. And for a lot of people, sometimes it's finding that happy medium between what is the dream job and what is good enough. And and we've lived with what is good enough in the Army. Like, hey, is this order good enough for me to go out on patrol? Yeah, let's roll. Versus, I'm going to meticulously analyze this down to the the very granular material of it, and then I'm going to miss an opportunity because I'm doing too much research. So again, it's that striking that happy balance between the two things.
And just to chime in real quick, one thing is right now we live in a great age because people want to help military veterans. Companies are willing to have conversations with military veterans. I do my own stock trading and make some income doing that as well. And I mentioned this because one thing I did is I found Guy Adami. He's every night you'll see him on CNBC's Fast Money. Very well respected trader. I found out he was in DC. Figured out what hotel he was in because he posted something about Twitter. He was speaking at something or other. So I sat there in the lobby waiting for him on a Saturday. Brought a bunch of books and I saw him in there. Hey, Mr. Dami, hey, Tom, I'm a military veteran. I'm really interested in this vetting. Oh, military veteran, thank you for service. Hey, how can I help you? Hey, listen, I would just love to pick your brain for trading. And so we went over, had dinner together, and he's sitting there like breaking down everything he does about like this is what I do, this is what I'm looking at, here's this thing. And like, sir, you mind if I can I get your email and just, in case I have a question? Yeah, sure, absolutely. Here you go. And so now I get someone use that veteran status to my advantage where someone was willing to talk to me and build a relationship where he's one of the best traders on the planet to sit there and pick his brain and see what he's doing. It's like, okay, if nothing else, I'm just going to do what Guy does. I mean, if learn from that and you start in kind of like how this podcast started, just reaching out to people, find someone that's doing what you want to do or that you might want to do and start striking up a conversation.
Yeah, and that's really what I want to do is I want to pick people's brains because I know I'm by no means an expert. I have 20 years of being a grunt, so that's always usually the more aggressive leadership style is equal to success. And sometimes there's a softer approach. I've had to learn that, as I transitioned or even as I became an electronic warfare officer because, the normal, hey, I'm going to use your head as a bowling ball kind of technique does not normally work, when you're amongst division staff and there's a lot more of your peers, that you're interacting with. So it's a definite way that you would have to change overall as you transition from the military. But that said, there's an appropriate time and place to have that tool in your back pocket.
Absolutely. One thing I used to have in my leadership is I got to command 2 FAT at the 101st. So basically, each battalion nominated a senior first lieutenant, and then the Divardi commander picked that person to lead. It was the best job I ever had in the Army because I worked directly for an O6 who had better things to do to keep track of what I was doing every day, which means I was always with my men in training, didn't spend a lot of time in meetings. I had 2 meetings a month. That was it. And we really had, it was like, wow, this is awesome. And getting that taste, that independence and being able to do things we wanted to do. But I had 2 section chiefs that were, very different. One, let's say they both messed up, I'd go to one guy and say, hey man, you kind of let me down. I'm a little disappointed. And that's like daggers going through his heart. He's going to fix it. Okay, now send in so-and-so. Comes in. And if I wasn't dropping F-bombs and threatening to smash his head against the wall, he didn't realize I was upset or that he did something wrong. And I would never talk to him at the same time because if I did one way to the other person, they'd shut down and vice versa. It would work. And so you had to kind of adjust your style.
Yeah, and I think that's an important attribute to have is being able to kind of use the rheostat of personalities on people when you have to deal with it. And it sucks because it feels like you're playing a game sometimes. But the reality of it is it's just knowing the folks that work for you, and I think that's an important part of developing as a leader, whether it be in the military or in business, is, oh yeah, this guy's going to react poorly if I go in there and I smash him, and again, there's an appropriate time and place, but there's also the time and place just to be like, hey man, like, what the right answer is, like, let's get it done, and huge.
Well, how you communicate is interesting. One of my favorite lessons of Gettysburg was General Ewell, and Lee had a very genteel way of speaking. He's used to Stonewall Jackson, who understood that, and he tells General Ewell, because Stonewall Jackson is dead, hey, take that hill with practicable. So a fancy way of saying practical. And Ewell's like, well, I think I have a choice. He looked at the situation. Hey, it's not practical. Let's do it in the morning. Lee's furious because what he really meant was take it at all cost. That's not what he said. And it's since you're always going back to your point about sometimes it feels like a game, but the thing is, you're ultimately responsible for the successful failure of the unit. It behooves you to kind of making sure you're on a level where one ticks. One of my favorite lessons from Detroit Sports Debates, a book I got for my birthday when I was in Afghanistan. It was a sports writer saying John Daly coached the Pistons, or Chuck Daly rather, coached the Pistons. Whenever he wanted to yell at whenever he was mad at Isaiah Thomas, he yelled at John Sally because he knew Isaiah Thomas could not take being yelled at. It would just mess him up. But he'd yell at John Sally, and then John Sally would translate it to the language that Isaiah Thomas needed to hear to do what needed to be done.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. I think that's one of the things that in the consciousness of America, the ability to coach is huge, and that's one of the things that we all, everybody has had a coach or someone that they worked with that they kind of enamored, and so having that relationship with them, hey, you let me down, or knowing that person's going to fire you up because you made a mistake. Those are the types of things that are very, very important to leadership. And so this will also help me kind of transition into this is the hidden gem question. I keep these kind of in reserve. So I have the 5 overall questions, and then based off of the direction of the conversation, I'll ask you one of these. And this is one of the ones that always hits pretty well. If you had to pick 2 leaders in your career, one good and one bad, what are the most valuable lessons that they taught you? You don't have to name names, but if you do, you can. It's all right. We have anonymity, at least. From at least time and distance, right? And so it'll take a while for them to run you down.
I would say the senior leadership in Afghanistan at the embassy, established by Ambassador Newman, I will drop his name. I mean, he was doing everything. I mean, basically, if he's coming off a flight and basically someone didn't know who the ambassador was because basically he saw someone struggling trying to move some kind of thing, and he goes, "Here, let me help you with that." And he's helping the guy, move some pallets or whatever, and didn't even know what the pallets were and didn't even ask. He's like, hey, here's an American who was struggling a bit with something and just did it, and didn't have this sense of I'm the most important person in the country. And I think that was just a great example for all of us to say, hey, we're all here to do a job. And the idea that he enforced on us is that you are not too good for any job that needs to be done. We have a job to do here. I don't care what your rank is. I don't care what your FS rank is. I don't care what your GS rank. I don't care whatever you work in this embassy. We have a job to do. And, we're all going to be rising above levels of responsibility. And sometimes you're going to be the guy who has to do some really mundane stuff that somewhere else would be some kind of blue collar employee, but guess what? It's you because it needs to be done.
That's pretty powerful.
As far as the bad example, I had a boss who basically what he would do. This is like we had there was 3 of us he was in charge of, and he'd sit there and say, okay, Tom, you're doing a fantastic job, but let me tell you how the other guys are all screwed up. This is all their problems, though, that kind of thing. I'm like, gee, I shouldn't be talking about this. No, I'm just don't say anything about this. And what I didn't know is he was having the same conversation with all three of us at times. And we took us a while to figure it out. So we make a joke of like, hey, so what are the things I need to improve upon? Because I'm a rock star when I'm in there with him, but then there's all these little things he would never tell me, and vice versa, everybody else. And it was just a terrible environment. And it was funny because the seniors never picked up on it. Just the other thing about that environment, it just shows you that leaders cannot have the blinders on. You have to really look at the clues and dig deeper into things. And where the faulty of leadership were people above him, there was a guy that worked above him who I was close to, and he didn't pick up on the fact. So what happened was this guy I worked for, the toxic guy, every Thursday, he'd have these happy hours. He'd bring in some alcohol to the office, and he had it all sanctioned. We'd have drinks, that kind of thing. But no one who worked for him at any level showed up. And then all these seniors would show up because he'd invite them. And finally, I was sitting there going to the guy, John Smith, we'll call him, who was the guy I was close to, who was above him. He's like, how come you guys never went to those things? I said, how come, and he eventually canceled these happy hours. I said, how come you guys didn't pick up on the fact nobody that worked for him ever showed up for sanctioned time on the company dime, if you will, the government dime, to have beer and chill? And we were just like, yeah, I'm just going to stay at my desk and work. I mean, that didn't clue you into hey, something's wrong here. And so it just, as you rise up in rank and responsibility and that kind of thing, it's harder because you're going to have gatekeepers. I saw it in the Army, just as even at battery level, people would try to keep things from me, that type of things, and keep me out of the loop. In some ways, it was good intention. They thought my time was valuable. They didn't want to bother with the problems. And you see Boeing, that's exactly what happened at Boeing. No one wanted to tell the boss what was going on with the airliner. And then suddenly you have some deadly consequences. And that environment, which was allowed to flourish because, he did it that way. And the clues from the senior leadership are failing there to actually kind of hey, let's dig a little deeper. Something's not really going on here. People don't want to be around this guy. And we use this thing of mission. They're accomplishing the mission. Well, if you're making everybody leave, are you really accomplishing the mission?
Yeah. That's true. And that's one of the things that people, there's a heartfelt discussion that everybody has to have, as a leader. It's like, am I going to be liked or am I going to be respected? Right. And that is two different things. Some people can't, equate the two and keep them separated, but you can be well respected and not well liked. It just depends on the organization. Or you can be well liked and not respected. Yeah, I really like the guy, but, he's not really good at X, Y, or Z. And that's one of the things that part of this whole discussion and everything that I'm trying to do is just capture those little nuggets of wisdom that come out from each one of these discussions that can be valuable to somebody who's transitioning. And I've had some amazing people come on, so far, and I'm only 5 episodes in, which is kind of cool. But the other part of it is I have people that are signing up that yeah, I want to do this. I want to have a conversation with you because I want to drop, some of those nuggets that I learned today, or a nugget that I learned 2 years ago, so it can help somebody else out during their transition. It's kind of like, what I used to see a lot when I worked at Ranger School. So you would see the instructors that would see a student that was struggling, but one of the things that they would do is hey man, I saw a leader not do this when I was in combat and it got somebody killed or injured. So if that guy did what he was supposed to do, or at least that would have rectified that situation that was real world that the instructor had seen, they give him the benefit of the doubt on the patrol, and so you see guys pass because they're hey, that guy was terrible. Well, sir, he wasn't the best, but he did X, Y, or Z. And when it becomes, really an issue with the real world and actual success or failure of an operational mission, then you give the guy a little bit more leeway. And that's one of the things that I absolutely enjoy about being a leader, is just observing those differences in people's personalities and letting them flourish. 2 things that you can do as a boss, and I've always said this, and this is what I've always asked for, is, give me a left and right limit and some top cover. If you give me those 2 things, I can thrive in that situation. And when I'm bumping up against, my left or right limit, that's the opportunity for you to give me the azimuth check. But if you give me, that top cover that I need, I can do a lot more for you just because I feel empowered. And I think empowering a subordinate is one of the things that we absolutely all have to learn, whether that be on the corporate side or on the military side, but trusting the other people that you work with. And that's hard to do, particularly when, you know, you're a military person transitioning and you're being told like, oh, corporate life is cutthroat and everybody's out for the dollar and this, that, or the other thing. But the reality of it is if you're mission oriented, you know, you'll have fewer of those problems.
And, you know, I think a part of this comes through to a larger national discussion. When I look at like, you know, kind of understanding cultures and such. We don't understand a culture, you know, like for instance, I'd be at DOS and hear them badmouth the military. Oh, these guys are a bunch of idiots who can't do anything without PowerPoint. Or the military said, you know, these guys can't do anything without unless there's a cable. All these kind of things back and forth. Like, have any of you actually talked to each other yet? Well, no. And when you have that lack of, like, everyone's like, oh, corporate, it's all cutthroat. And I found that, no, like people talk about the businessman, you know, the unethical businessman. Like, well, you know, if you are unethical, you aren't going to be in business very long. You know, you may pull off a scam or two here or there, but then you are just done because there's so much of business is on trust. And the whole, like, everyone's up, yeah, people are out for a dollar. But think about this. There's less waste. I mean, think of some of the stupid bureaucratic stuff you'd sit through in the Army. Well, because the dollar is an instant measure of success, you're not going to tolerate a lot of that stuff out there. Hold on a second. We're losing money here. The hurry up and wait thing you'd experience in the military, there's no way a civilian organization would ever allow that. Like, we're doing what? We're paying people to sit around here for 6 hours waiting for a flight? Are you kidding me?
True statement. I mean, yeah. And one of the things, but it does build a little resilience, you know, so like this whole COVID thing is basically like pre and post deployment. You know, you're sitting at NTC in the Dust Bowl waiting to go out for the FTX, and then you come back and then you're waiting to load up all the trucks so you can ship them back to home station. So I know that a lot of the military folks have been a little bit more adjusted to, you know, sitting around and waiting for the word from the government to release everybody. Doesn't reduce the frustration at any point, but I still think it's a great opportunity to, you know, to kind of understand, you know, that perspective. So for those of you at home that aren't in the military that are listening, like, hey, welcome to our world, you know, like, hey, hurry up and wait, like you just said. Tom, this has been great, man. I appreciate you coming on. Yeah, I've enjoyed this conversation, but it's like I haven't not enjoyed any of them because I learn something new every day. And that's one of the things that I always try and do is learn something new. But one of the things that I would like to do before we close out, so I can, you know, give you a chance to plug anything that you're working on currently, and then any websites or anything else, you can shoot them to me in a note or whatever, but I'll definitely put them in the description for the podcast today. But here's your unexploited cheap plug for anything that you're doing right now.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Rob. I appreciate that. So, right now, I got my book, Leadership Lessons in the Battle of Gettysburg. That's on Amazon, a digital copy and a physical copy. I also have a course of the same title on Udemy, udemy.com. I'll be posting up a crisis leadership course as well. And right now, like for your AI needs, I'm kind of forming a new enterprise right now, and we're doing some, basically, I got two different focus points. One, we're doing some stuff in the CBD space, helping with quality assurance and that type of thing, and actually working with Ali Palmer on that, another one of our classmates, that company Pinnacle Elevation Group, and we're going to be doing a lot of cool things, helping farmers with using AI and stuff for anomaly detection, and then helping labs to better do their processes. And then another thing I'm doing right now with some data scientists, I worked with the government. We're kind of doing some AI stuff in terms of helping businesses as, you know, ad hoc things, helping them do their AI infrastructure, building out things and this and that. So, you know, a lot of different things going in there. And then, working on a project with Rich Fredericks as we're doing some stuff to help people integrate technology into their work environments in space. So as you can see, I'm open to a lot of different things. I got a lot of irons in the fire, and always building relationships. And so if there's anyone that wants to contact me for any of these projects, or if you're just like, hey, there's something else you want me to take a look at or help, I'm always happy to have a conversation to help people diagnose problems. And or if, you know, you want to know, like, how do you write a book, for example, I can happy to help people with that. So always interested in the conversation.
All right. Awesome. And again, I thank you. I appreciate it. I'm gonna set up a time for a more business-like call after this.
Absolutely. So
I'll shoot you a note, but I'm definitely interested in some of those AI applications. Again, like I really appreciate you coming on. This has been great. Like I've enjoyed doing this podcast, and like I said, I'm 5 episodes in, but I'm learning a tremendous amount. And the other part of it is it's nice to see varying different flavors of people and their success, and success is relative to, whomever's in the middle of the project. But I'm glad to see that you're doing well. It's always cool to reach out and talk to a classmate, and go Friars.
Yeah, go Friars. Thanks for having me on, Rob. Really appreciate this. I love what you're doing here. This is important. I think it's good. And getting all these different voices in there. And I'll just sort of, one thing I will say to people is your first thing you transition to after the military may not be where you end up for a long time. And don't be afraid. Like, here's the thing. You're going to take something because you have the information at the time to make a decision. You think this is great. Then you're going to get there. Maybe you hate your boss. You hate this, or this is not this, or this is not what I envisioned. Don't be afraid to, you know what? Maybe I'm not where I need to be. Don't suffer through this. This is not the military. You're stuck in your PCS and you got to wait 2 years to do that. You can just kind of say, you can do a 2 weeks notice and say, you know what, this is just not a good fit for me.
Yeah.
Or even, you know what, I think I'm good in the organization, but I don't think this job I'm doing right now is the best fit for me.
Yeah, I know that was one of the first lessons that I was told when I was on terminal leave. It's like, you don't owe them anything, and unless you're assigned to a contract, you do have the autonomy to move on if you need to. And I think one of the things that Eric said when we were talking is, the pressure of having employment as you're transitioning becomes your primary method of picking your job, which it shouldn't be. And like you said, to be as best informed as you can when you pull the trigger. And that starts, with all the education programs and resources that are available to you, through the military. But the other part of it is your network is important. Reach out to guys and gals that are doing the things that, like, oh, that seems interesting. Like, I want to try that, and then reach out and be like, hey, Tom, I hear you're doing some leadership speaking. How do I get to that point? Or is there something that I can, assist you with so I can learn how to do this better? And I think, one of the things that we have to do, particularly as folks that have stayed in for, 15 plus years in the military, is being able to eat that small piece of humble pie and not be afraid to ask for assistance.
Absolutely not. I mean, that's the thing. I'm always asking questions, always trying to learn something new and different. And it just keeps me fresh and keeps me growing.
All right. Well, Tom, I'll let you go. It's been
all right.
It's been awesome. I appreciate it. Look for this thing to go up probably today, a bit later in the afternoon, but I appreciate your time. And once again, this is Rob Robinson from the Philosophy from the Frontline podcast. All right. See you on the high ground.
Take care, Rob. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Philosophy from the Frontline with Rob Robinson. We will bring you more interesting veteran transition stories, veteran advocacy, and more information in veterans transition in general on a podcast platform near you. This is Philosophy from the Frontline, and we'll see you on the high ground. Thanks.